Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are a subscriber, welcome back. If you haven't subscribed yet, please don't forget to do so. It really means the world to me. So in today's video, I want to discuss designer belt trends for 2025. I want to look at what's in, what's out, and what seems to be a timeless classic. And by the way, before I go any further, I actually wanted to preface all of this by saying that all of this is my opinion only. And obviously, if you have a belt that you love and that you have been styling really well, continue wearing it no matter what I actually have to say. All I'm trying to do is look at some of the latest trends on the runway because I think this is fun and derive some of the main themes from it. I actually also brought out my own belts in this box right here from my closet because I want to go ahead and kind of look at them with you and look which ones from the belts that I have actually maybe more relevant than others. So I have examples for you. And by the way, everything that I'm going to be mentioning in this video today, I'm going to link in the description box down below, or at least the belts that I'm going to be able to actually find online. So you can also shop this video easily. So without further ado, let's talk about the belts that are out. And by now, you would probably guess that the belts that are out and maybe not as fashionable in 2025 are the belts with designer buckle logos. So I'm talking about things like the famous Gigi Marmont belt that, by the way, you can actually still buy everywhere. So if I look at my own collection, let me just see, I actually have 3 logo belts. So the 3 logo belts that I have are right here. The first one is this belt from Givenchy, which is a two-sided belt. One side is kind of this beige color, and the other side is the black color, black leather. So I actually really like this belt, and I used to wear it a lot together with my Givenchy Antigona. And as I mentioned before at the beginning of this video, I would still wear this belt if I feel like I can actually style it in a contemporary way. So the second belt that I have with the designer buckle is the Salvatore Ferragamo belt. It is silver on one side, black on the other side, and this was probably one of my earliest belt purchases, and I wore this belt a lot. I especially like accessories that are metallic, so maybe silver, the one right here, and gold as well. And the third belt I have in this category is this Hermes H buckle belt from Hermes. I mentioned this belt quite a lot on this channel, and mostly I talk negatively about it just because I feel like this belt has been really overdone. So it's got the H buckle, it is double-sided, so we've got blue leather on one side and this kind of chocolate brown leather on the other side. And this was perhaps my first purchase from Hermes, although I'm really not sure by now. Anyway, belts like this, belts with obvious designer buckles, are kind of really out in 2025. However, as I say this, there are still a couple of caveats. Well, first of all, I think what is really out are the belts that are basically of this width. This is kind of 35 or 30, 35 millimeter wide belts. Because when it comes to thinner belts with a designer, with a logo belt buckle, we actually still see some of them on the runways. So let me show you some examples. So the Gigi Marmont belt from Gucci, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we still see that belt on the Gucci runway so much. However, it is a thinner version than the Gigi belt we are used to seeing from, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or a decade ago. Also, you will notice that now Gucci is styling this belt a little bit differently. Everything else that goes together with the belt is just such an updated and much more current version of the look. So for example, this belt is styled with wide-legged jeans, also with wide-legged pants, also with these amazing long trench coats, as well as Gucci tank tops. So definitely this is such an updated modern look, and therefore the belt doesn't really look outdated when we take into consideration the entire look. Also, I think it is much more prevalent these days to style this Gucci belt in a monochromatic way. So if I think back to the pictures, maybe we remember from like 2010 or 2012, people used to wear this black GG belt together with like a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. But now we see these belts maybe in red or in white on the runway, and it is totally kind of a complete monochromatic look. Speaking further about designer belts with this logo belt buckle, I also saw at least one such belt in a Valentino collection on the runway. And in that particular case, that belt was just kind of a juxtaposition to a much more relaxed and bohemian look. So, with all of this being said, I think that generally speaking, logo belts are a little bit out of style, but still there are very modern and up-to-date ways to actually style them. And by the way, my name is Lisa, and I'm your guide to savvy luxury shopping no matter where in the world you are. Subscribe to my channel to learn more about strategic luxury shopping with the emphasis on quality and timelessness of your items. So, what is in? What is trending instead? Well, I think nowadays in 2025, we actually see a lot of classic leather belts, but these are classic leather belts with a twist. So, first and foremost, we see a lot of classic leather belts with an outstanding buckle, a buckle which basically makes these belts stand out and offers a real chunky statement addition to the outfit. So here we can see the following examples. We can see large belt buckles from Miu Miu. We also see colorful leather buckles in Valentino collections. And we see a lot of such outstanding or standout buckles in Bottega Veneta collections. So, for example, these pictures from the runway feature what I believe is called a bunny belt, and this belt is actually also available online. And the buckle basically features, bunny ears. And generally speaking, if we look at Bottega Veneta, I feel like they are really on the forefront of this trend. So, for example, we see the fin buckles available from Bottega Veneta. We also see the sardine buckles. We also see very chunky abstract buckles from Bottega Veneta and a number of other designs as well. And last but not least, on the runway, we also saw a lot of belts from Hermes that were really standout belts. And the one that really caught my attention was the Collier de Chauny. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, belt. So these belts are actually now available online, and because they include so much hardware, and all of the Hermes hardware is actually palladium plated or gold plated, these belts actually retail for 5,000 US dollars. So really such a massive investment. But once again, on the runway, they looked really outstanding because it was such a great way to add additional spark and an additional statement to the outfit. And further, when we talk about kind of classic leather belts, we also saw a lot of kind of very streamlined classic leather belts on the runway as well. So here I'm talking about examples from Prada and also Valentino. There were examples from Kate and also examples from Miu Miu, featuring belts that basically had a buckle that was also covered in leather and was the same color as the rest of the belt. So those belts looked very simple and very streamlined. And a special note here is that I feel like on the runway, especially for spring 2025, we actually saw a lot of simple, kind of streamlined belts with a simple metallic buckle, but executed in chocolate brown leather, which is such a hot color for this season anyway. And by the way, I think it is actually so interesting to rely on chocolate brown accessories as opposed to black accessories. I feel like all of us are probably a little bit tired of constantly wearing black shoes, black belts, and black handbags. So I kind of welcome this addition of more brown and chocolate brown colors in our wardrobes because I think this is such a fresh look on accessories. So when it comes to simple leather streamlined belts with a buckle, I looked at my collection collection, and honestly, there is not much that I actually have. But I have this one belt, which is also quite old, from Saint Laurent, which is black. It is one-sided, and it does have this quite simple streamlined buckle. Now, it does have, oops, this way, it does have YSL on the side of the buckle right here, but because this YSL is just on the side of the buckle instead of being the buckle itself, I just kind of think that, at least in my mind, this belt sort of fits the current trend, the trend that we see in 2025 of wearing simple, streamlined leather belts. Now, unfortunately, I actually do not have anything with a standout abstract buckle like what we saw, for example, from Mio Mio or Bottega Veneta, but for the time being, I'm not as bothered, and I'm just gonna sit here and see where this trend goes further. So trend number 2 for belts in 2025 are skinny belts. And we actually saw so many of them on the runway. Let's go back to Hermes. They had quite a few different skinny belts featured in their looks, and they were worn in so many different ways. So, for example, they actually paired a skinny leather belt together with a silk scarf, which I thought was such a fresh and interesting way to wear a belt. We also saw at least 2 skinny belts being kind of layered together in some of the Hermes looks. And we also saw a skinny belt being worn maybe with trousers or a skirt that already had a belt detail within the garment itself. So many ways to really use a skinny belt as an accessory. In some other looks, for example, from the row, we actually saw a skinny belt being used to cinch quite a hefty jacket. So I feel like this is a little bit different because in previous looks, we would normally see like a wider belt being used on a larger jacket. But here with the row, we actually saw a skinny belt. And also, let's not forget about the Gigi Marmont belt from Gucci, which was featured on the Gucci runway so much, as I already mentioned earlier in today's video. So in my collection, I actually have 3 skinny belts. So the first one right here is from Hermes, and I really like this buckle because it doesn't scream Hermes, but it is still so kind of understated, so cool, and if you know, you know that this is an Hermes buckle. So I'm really looking forward to styling this belt in the summer. Another 2 skinny belts, or the other 2 skinny belts that I have, are actually from Stella McCartney. Now, these have been with me for a very long time. As you probably know, I talk about it a lot on this channel, but I used to be vegan, so I would buy a lot of Stella McCartney stuff. And to be honest, I haven't worn these belts for a very long time, so maybe I will do so now. So this skinny belt right here is in burgundy, and then I have another one which also has a very interesting print on it. Let me just show you. And by the way, I mean, if you don't know, Stella McCartney actually doesn't use leather in its collections. So in this case, you know, the belts that Stella McCartney puts out are vegan. So if this is important to you, you know, this is definitely a brand to consider. So the other skinny belt from Stella McCartney I have is right here, and it's got this kind of subtle snake print. So these are my skinny belts, and I figured I should actually go ahead and maximize their use in 2025. So the next trend for belts in 2025 is kind of the opposite of what we just talked about. The next trend is a trend for wide belts. So we still see quite a few different wide belts being featured on the runway, but perhaps in a slightly different way. So instead of using a wide belt to maybe cinch a jacket or a blazer, we increasingly see wide belts being used with dresses and kind of lighter materials. So for example, there are quite a few different looks from Saint Laurent where they've used a wide belt with a dress. And especially we see quite a few wide belts in chocolate brown color. But with Saint Laurent, we also see these wide belts executed in this woven leather in beige and black color, and also paired with dresses. Another designer that featured a wide belt in its collection is Kate, and they paired up this really wide leather belt together with this gorgeous leopard print coat. I think that look looked so chic on the runway. And last but not least, we also saw some wide belts from Miu Miu as well, also in chocolate brown color. So the first wide belt I have is this black leather belt from Isabel Marant. I think this is such a statement. It is such a chic belt, and I really like wearing it with a dress to kind of cinch the dress in the middle. I'm really planning to wear this belt for many years to come because I feel that even if wide belts kind of go out of style, there is still a way to create a dramatic look by incorporating this belt into your outfit. And the next wide belt I have is actually from my favorite designer, as you know, Maison Margiela, and this was a present from my husband. I believe these belts are actually still available online, so I will make sure to link a couple of versions. But this is a black full leather belt, and by the way, the leather on this belt feels so nice. I do not know, it's just so luxurious and so refined. And the buckle is quite simple. It is also covered in leather. But once again, I feel like I can use this belt with a dress, as we have noticed, on the runway recently, but also obviously to maybe cinch a jacket or a coat or anything of that nature. So such a nice thick leather belt that is also just really outstanding quality, which I really like when it comes to Maison Margiela. So, trend number 4 for belts in 2025 are utility belts. So, we saw quite a few utility belts from Prada on the runway, and these belts were different. They came in different sizes, so anything from a thin belt to a thicker belt. But they really looked like utility belts to me because they were basically used to kind of hold up the garment, whether it was a skirt or a pair of trousers, and the belts were kind of executed in this rough utility character. Also, we saw quite a few different belt bags on the runway as well. And I'm just kind of putting them here under this utility category. But we saw belt bags from Hermes, the Row, Valentino, and also from Chloe. With Chloe, however, these belt bags were a little bit different because they were actually attached to chain belts. And we will talk about chain belts in just a little bit in this video. So, trend number 5 for belts in 2025 are wide fabric belts. And I'm also putting a lot under this category because we definitely saw some wide fabric belts on the runway, but we also saw scarves like silk scarves and cashmere scarves, as well as sweaters and perhaps cardigans being used as belts as well. So, I'm kind of putting all of this in this one category of fabric belts. So, let's look at some examples. So with Hermes, we obviously saw silk scarves being used as belts. And there was also this one interesting look from Hermes where they had, I believe, a cashmere scarf that was basically tied as a belt in this all white look. Then from Miu Miu, we saw quite a lot of different looks where they used perhaps sweaters or cardigans being tied as kind of like a very high-waisted belt. Then also, when we look at Fendi on the runway, they featured these striped shirts that were tied with a fabric belt, and I believe those belts are actually separate garments from the shirts, but they match the shirts exactly. We also saw a couple of looks from Kate where they used leather and fabric belts to tie jackets. And from Valentino, we saw these looks with a really wide, intricate looking satin belt that was used on dresses and I believe other garments as well. So basically, a lot of different items being used as a belt, and I put all of this under this kind of one category of fabric belts or perhaps wide fabric belts. And interestingly, when I looked at my collection from many, many, many years ago, I actually have this fabric belt from Stella McCartney. And I cannot even tell you when was the last time when I actually wore this, because I couldn't think of a way to style it. And at some point, I actually also felt like this belt was really outdated. But seeing some of the runway looks right now, especially from Hermes and Miu Miu and Kate, I actually think I'm gonna go ahead and challenge myself in styling this really wide fabric belt from Stella McCartney. So we talked about what's out, what's in. Now let's talk about something timeless. And I think when it comes to belts, the timeless belts are actually chain belts. And looking at the runways from these past couple of seasons, or rather from spring 2025 and also a bit of fall 2025, I think we saw so many designers using and interpreting these chain belts in different ways. So Chloe definitely featured so many chain belts on the runway, and they came in so many different kind of shapes and sizes. So we had the chain belts that actually featured the Chloe logo. We also had very bohemian chain belts that added this additional embellishment to the outfit. Then we also saw maybe a bit more utilitarian chain belts. I mentioned them before. These are the ones that actually had a small belt bag attached to them. We also saw designers like Totem using chain belts, but in a very understated way, where the chain belt was just kind of peeking out from the clothing just a little bit. And then we also saw Saint Laurent using chain belts, also kind of in an understated way, just pairing them with this really light and whimsical dresses. And last but not least, we also saw a lot of chain belts on Miu Miu garments. And for Miu Miu, these belts were really a statement. First of all, these metal chain belts were a statement in and of themselves, but then also they were just layered together. They were layered also with kind of simple leather belts. So altogether, they just provided so much punch and so much embellishment to an outfit. So again, seeing so many chain belts on the runway this year just kind of makes me think that when it comes to different belt styles, chain belts are something that kind of stays with us forever. This is something that I think is truly timeless. And just to prove my point, I actually have this exceptionally old, I feel like I say this about every single item that I have, but I've got this exceptionally old chain belt from Versace that I bought probably, I do not know, but somewhere around 2010. And again, I haven't worn it very much just because I, tend to forget about some things that I have. It's got this little Versace logo right here. But now I think I'm gonna go ahead and actually try to style this belt a little bit more just because I saw so many different chain belts being styled on the runway. And if I look at this belt, it is fairly simple as compared to so many chain belts that we have seen recently. But this is the beauty of it. There are just so many different ways to style a chain belt. And because this one is kind of simple, I feel like I'm going to be able to style it even 10 or 20 years from now. All right, and before I sign off, I actually really want to talk about new and updated ways of wearing a belt in 2025. So the first point I wanted to make is that on the runway, we saw a lot of belts that were actually a bit longer with the excess of the belt simply kind of hanging off. So there are definitely some examples from Prada that I'm going to show right here. So maybe buying a longer belt, if you're planning to buy a belt in 2025, is a good idea. Another kind of innovation that I saw on the runways was basically layering a lot of belts together. And this includes chain belts, but also leather belts, thick belts, and also skinny belts. I think this is a very interesting way to use your accessories. Number three here is basically using scarves, sweaters, and cardigans as belts. I think this is so creative and it can give us so many different ideas of how to bring new life into our wardrobe. The next point is basically layering the belts, maybe even skinny belts, or maybe specifically skinny belts, together with silk scarves. We saw this on Hermes models, and once again, I think this is such a creative and fresh way of doing something. So another idea of how to wear a belt in 2025 is basically just use a belt as an accessory. It doesn't have to have a purpose. So we saw this at Hermes a lot because we had these models who were wearing belts, just kind of layering them on top of their trousers or on their tights, and the belts really didn't have a purpose. They were not really cinching anything or they were not really holding anything in place. And the last idea for 2025 is to perhaps use thin belts to cinch heavier garments like jackets, something that we have not necessarily seen in the years past. Anyway, that's it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know down in the comments below which of the belt trends for 2025 are you excited about. And before you go, please watch this video next. In this video, I talk about more general luxury trends for 2025. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to like this video. Take care and bye-bye.